conclusion of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me," and he sent out his disciples to make disciples. But halfway through the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew records in chapter 14 how that authority had been misused and abused. How often that is the case in this world. When people have authority either thrust upon them or they grasp it to themselves, it is abused so horribly. Here we have the account of Herod the Tetrarch, who had taken John the Baptist into prison because he was annoyed. He was perturbed with John the Baptist because John was pointing his finger at Herod, saying, "It is not right for you to have your brother's wife." And indeed, that was not right. But Herod, though he feared John, he used his authority to grab a hold of him and to try to silence him. And along with that, there is the death of John the Baptist by the conniving of Herodias and her daughter. And John's head is detached from his body and in gruesome scene is brought before a festive party on a platter. But his disciples came and took his body away and buried him. And they come and they tell Jesus. Authority abused, authority that is squandered, authority that could be used for such good, it is frequently used for harm. It is frequently ending in pain and in such shame. But Jesus, what a different picture we get from him as we continue to read past the viciousness of Herod and Herodias. Herod not wanting to disappoint his guests, not wanting to go back on his word, though surely that word was a foolish, utterly foolish word. Jesus, in contrast, he uses his authority to bless. Here is the picture of God. We read that Jesus has come among us, that he is the picture of God the Father. He is the very picture of the character of God, that we might understand the God who calls us to himself. And Jesus, what does he do with this authority? This foretaste of authority, that foretaste of the all authority in heaven and on earth that has been given to him. We see in Matthew chapter 14, Jesus feeding the 5,000. Now when Jesus heard about John and his death, he withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. And when the people heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. They were naturally drawn to him. There was an attraction. They just could not get enough of him and of the gracious words that he spoke. He comes ashore. He saw a large crowd, and what does he feel? Does he feel annoyed? Does he feel, oh, why won't these people leave me alone? It says he felt compassion for them, and he healed their sick. But the day grows long, and time passes, the evening comes, and the disciples come to him and they say to him, "This place is desolate and the hour is late. Send these crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." And Jesus said, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves and 2 fish. What in the world is that? It's comical. It's ridiculous that we would even say it out loud, but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." And here is what he does with the authority. He does not aggrandize himself. He does not puff himself up, but he works to bless. That is the very picture of the God who sent Jesus to Bethlehem and sent him to Calvary's cross for you and for me, that we might know salvation, that we might know his redemption. He says, bring that little, tiny, tiny bit to me. And Jesus, he has the people sit down. He takes those bits of bread and those bits of fish. He looks up into heaven. He blesses the food. And breaking, he gives to the disciples. The disciples give to the crowds. And it says that they all ate. It wasn't that there were just sort of representatives out of the crowd who had a nibble. It says they all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up the leftover pieces, broken pieces, and there was 12 baskets full of them, 5,000 who ate, besides women and children, a great multitude indeed. The account goes on in Matthew chapter 14, and here, once again, is Jesus' authority as he sends the disciples away and as he dismisses the crowds as well. He goes to a mountain to pray. Here is authority which knew where his power came from. Jesus realized that his power was drawn from his Father who had sent him, and he calls out upon his Father and he prays. And he's there alone, and he sees that his disciples were already a long way from the land, but there was trouble. They were battered by the waves, and the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, he comes to them walking on the sea. He uses his authority to come to those who were distressed. Once again, that authority could have set himself up and puffed himself up, but not just as he fed the multitudes, as he blessed, so he comes to his disciples in their turmoil, in their trouble, when they possibly thought, we're not sure whether we're going to make it tonight. We've seen storms before, but we're not sure. Jesus comes to them as he walks out, and he speaks to them even as they cry out, thinking that it was a ghost, that it was a spirit who is haunting them. Jesus, he cries out and he says, take courage, it is I. Peter is the one here who says, Lord, if it is you, if it really is you, command me that I might come to you on the water. And Jesus, he issues an invitation. I would want you to hear this invitation. The wind was still blowing and the waves were still crashing on the side of that boat and jumping over into that boat. But Jesus, he says, come. In the midst of the storms that we face, Jesus issues this invitation for us to come to him and that we might find peace in him. Of course, the well-known account is that Peter, he takes his eyes off of Jesus and he sees the waves and he hears the wind that is howling round about his ears, and he starts to sink. And Jesus, he reaches out, and here is that second chance. Here is that opportunity when Jesus, he reaches down to Peter as he's sinking down, and he grabs a hold of him and he lands him safe back into that boat. And the disciples, their response was, you are certainly God's Son. And they worshiped him. They worshiped him. I would bid you in the midst of the storm, perhaps right now, the waves are crashing and the wind is howling, such as what you have never seen it before. Whatever the turmoil, whatever the storm is, Jesus is the one who has all authority, and he is the one who comes to bless. He is the one who comes to strengthen. He is the one who comes to encourage and to uphold you. Oh, look to him. Look to him and live even today.